Hello everybody, and welcome to the third installment of our USAePay training series. This is Melanie Gonzalez, VP of Product Development. Today's webinar will focus on the different tools available inside the new console and the features and functions of these tools. We're going to focus on things like e-invoicing, fraud tools, and more. For those of you that have submitted requests for demo logins, those requests have been sent to USAePay, and you should be receiving your credentials shortly. Also, Part 1 and 2 have been posted and are available in the training archive on Epic. Today, once again, we have Bridget Davis from USAePay, who will be going over the console and the new tools inside the console.
So this is our invoicing screen. So from here, you have the option to search for an invoice type. So there's a number of different options to search by. I would suggest to just enter the @ symbol, and then depending on what you want to search by, you have these options here. So say we're doing, maybe let's see, I can select. We'll do customer email. So once I select customer email, then I'm able to enter, the actual email address here. Well, that's actually supposed to actually search for it then. So notice that my screen has now just limited to just the search option here. I think we're actually looking to fine-tune the search functionality to where you could just input the information without having to enter the prefix search category. But for the time being, this is how a customer or merchant would search for certain things with this search engine. And actually, just to kind of go over the search functionality since I'm on that now, that actually would apply the same to our general search tab. So keep in mind with our search function, you can search just about any transaction by just about anything, whether it be, last four of card, last name, amount, things like that. So that same search function or category would apply with the general search option. But again, the invoicing feature does have its own search function here. So I want to go and discuss just quickly the options button here. So notice that we have certain criteria that is by default going to display for a customer, like our invoice number, due date, last name, first name, company name, things like that. Should they want to customize these columns here, it's actually something that they can easily do. For example, maybe we'll go to reset default here. So say my current fields are company, first name, due date, invoice, and all the ones up top, but maybe I don't need company names, so I'm just going to remove that. Maybe I just want to search or have the last name available, but maybe I do want the actual invoice date to appear, and the amount paid. We'll include that as well. So now that I've done that, I would save it, and now my current field would display these. However, if they ever want to go back to what the default was, they can always just select Reset Default. So for the sake of the training, I'm going to just go ahead and save it. As you can see now, my columns here have changed. So that's easy. That customizing those columns are easy to do now. Now, I wanted to also talk about the settings for the invoice feature, because this is where a merchant would basically customize what their invoice options would be. So we have default terms that would appear on an invoice. We have a default footer. Of course, these options, these actual line items are optional. We have an inventory location. So should they want to actually pull products from a stored products database, they would just basically select those options or that option to do so in the settings feature. So for example, if we leave it at not applicable, then it's not going to pull from anything. However, if we have a, so there's different warehouses where a merchant can store certain products. So now the warehouse you could select from this section. So it would basically pull from that warehouse is available under that merchant's gateway account in their products database. So we have our shipping taxable options. Is it, you can select yes, you can select no. Automatically generate invoice number. If you select yes, then the options would appear down below here. Invoice prefix. You can do a next number. So this is basically the number that you're starting your invoices from. And then you could choose an offset number. So if you want it maybe to have an increment of 2, so we would do 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. If we select a prefix, an invoice prefix, this could actually be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a date. Usually a date is good enough, I would say, but they could add or customize that as well. Again, they can always leave that as no. Set default tax rate on invoices. This is an optional yes or no. Send reminder emails. So reminder emails, this is basically going out to a customer, letting them know, hey, you have an invoice due coming up. And then we want to also, if you want to let them know how many days in advance, you can select that. And then as far as this last option here, send the invoice status update email. So if you select yes, you're basically just entering an email address to where you would want, this is for the merchant. So this is where they would receive a status update of their invoices that were sent. So for example, when a quote gets sent out, when it gets paid, when it gets viewed, when it gets, whatever the status may be, they're going to receive an email for it. So as consumers, I feel that we're used to this, but on the merchant end, we just want to remind them that if they have quite a few invoices going out, that they're going to get quite a few emails regarding this. That's just something you want to let them know. There isn't a way to kind of just customize it to just maybe receive paid or just to receive the viewed ones or the sent ones. So it's kind of an all or nothing type of deal with that status update option there. So I'll go ahead and apply my options. And let's go ahead and just close out the screen. And so I wanted to just go ahead and show actually in detail what the invoice function and how that works. Let's go in here. So it's going to ask, a few things. So this, of course, would be the merchant's information up top. Let me just make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Now we have billing information. So this is something that you can ultimately enter as a one-off sort of deal, or you can just search by an actual customer that's already in the database. So for instance, I'm just going to select this stored customer here, and it should pre-populate all of their information that was previously set or stored for that customer. Next thing you would do is enter the shipping information, should it be different or the same, I should say, as what was in the customer stored profile. I would basically select same as billing. If it's something different, maybe it's being shipped elsewhere, this is where you would enter independently where it's going. So we have a, let's see, we have an auto invoice number that's going to be preset for us since we've already selected it. PO number we didn't actually select, so I would just go ahead and enter maybe a PO number. Here are my terms. Here is my due date. We'll say, June 10th, 2017. Here we have the option to enter a product name. So from here, you'd have to pull from, again, the products in your products database. So I would just go ahead and either select by item. Of course, if there is something that is not necessarily stored at that moment, you can also just go ahead and independently write what the actual invoice is for. And it will ask you for the price, it will ask you for the quantity, it will ask you for whether it's taxable or not. Then from here you can delete the item. For the sake of the training, I'm just going to go with my all too famous cupcakes here. And I'm going to go ahead and change the quantity to say maybe, oh, that's a lot of cupcakes. We'll say 10. We'll say here we're going to go ahead and enter invoice notes. So we'll do pre-order for a birthday party. Tax rate, you can enter there independently. Shipping amount, that you can enter that separately should that apply. I'm going to go ahead and just create this here so you can see what the option would be. So once you hit create, we have the option to preview it, send it. I'm going to go ahead and just do preview just so you guys can see what it looks like. So this is basically what is the when the end user receives the invoice, this is what they will see. And this is how it appears. So they can download it as a PDF, and it clearly states it's just a quote. It's not a finalized amount. I'm going to go back here to say OK. So say I'm now ready. OK, I'm ready to send my invoice. I'm going to go ahead and send it. But maybe I want to send it as a quote. So this is going to be send as quote. So my invoice would have been sent. So this is what the email looks like. It clearly, again, states it's just a quote. Very kind of small glimpse of what it would be. Of course, I can again click on that as a customer or consumer. Click on the invoice and see what see the details of it. So again, that was just the quote option. So now, if I'm ready to send it, say I'm ready to go. I think that's fine. The customer says it's okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and just check this finalize invoice and mark as sent. Oh, before I do so, let me actually just go back to the invoice section. So this is the one that's currently pending right now. Notice that the status of it is quote. So once I go ahead and click on it, it'll take me back to it. I will click on send, finalize invoice, and mark as sent, send invoice. My invoice was sent. Just got the email. Let's see. So now my email is sent here. So view invoice. Notice it no longer says quote. So now I have the option to pay it. This is an option and only sent once we finalize our invoices. But going back to the manager of the actual invoice screen, notice that now my status says sent. So as a customer, I'm going to go into my pay invoice or pay click on that button that says pay invoice. I'm just going to go ahead and proceed to make this payment here for these cupcakes. Expiration date, we'll do 20, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So now my payment's been made. It's successful. I now see that my payment was made. I can print this. Well, let's see. I don't know that I can make this bigger, but so they have the option to print it. You can download this as a PDF. The PDF version looks just like this. Going back to the merchant screen, notice it now says paid, and that's pretty much it. Very user-friendly. Notice that even on the customer or consumer end, it's very easy to basically maneuver through. And going back to the paid status, this is basically what the result of it is. Now I can see it was paid. Let me see, preview. All right, so moving forward, I don't know if we want to take any questions now regarding the invoice feature. It is very user-friendly, like I said. There's really not much to it, but works fantastically and could even, be a way to kind of, maybe even move away from the QuickBooks function. So I'll open it up for just questions related to just invoicing at the moment.
So we did have one question on my side. All this functionality, is this done on the MP200 unit or from the merchant's computer?
This is all done from the merchant's interface, or the merchant's desktop. This isn't a card present scenario, I would say. So there isn't a swipe functionality here, or dip or contactless. So we can think of this being, more, I guess, online based. So the customer would be, wherever they are, accessing their email, paying the invoice themselves from somewhere else. Should the customer be present, I wouldn't necessarily go the invoice route, I would say. It's always an option. But there isn't a way to connect the MP200 to the invoice function at this time. All right, so again, that's a very neat feature. It works really well. Again, this is a very new feature for us. So should you have, merchants maybe, have concerns about something related to this functionality, or maybe they have suggestions as to how maybe it would work better for them, we're always open to hearing those. There's actually a report bug option in this new console. So you can always send suggestions in this section too. You're welcome to let your merchants know the same. We're basically at this point, because it's such a new console, we want to hear feedback from our merchants, from our partners, just to kind of see how we can make it better. So we're very excited about our invoice feature. We think it works really well, but of course we're always open to suggestions to make it work even better.
One more question came in on my side about the invoice feature. Is there any ability to customize the invoice?
Customize the what? I'm sorry, it broke up just a bit.
Sorry about that. Customize the invoice.
So customizing it, like how? Let me just go back into the add invoice screen. So are they referring to what, like the actual formatting of the invoice?
Well, I mean, I guess, could you move the billing information to another side? Could you add maybe a customer logo, something like that?
So the logo, I believe, would apply when we go. So the logo, yes, that would be something that would be controlled through the merchant section. Should they have a logo here, it should appear on the invoice screen as well. As far as toggling sections, removing sections, unfortunately there isn't a way to do that at the moment. I know we're familiar with customizing when it comes to like our payment forms and our custom receipts and things like that. But this doesn't have that much flexibility when it comes to to customizing. Everything's going to be like that default template I showed previously.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course. So if there aren't any more questions related to invoicing, one last thing I did want to discuss was the fact that we do have, that the online tool, which would be helpful for you as an agent or even your merchants that are new to this console and maybe want a reminder of how things work. So for example, I'm in this URL now, and I'm sure you guys will have this available to you guys as well. So we have a console guide section. We have, let's go back to the dashboard to see here from the very beginning. So we have dashboard. We're still, and just so you guys know, we're kind of still working on this side. But as far as the content, this is what would apply for you guys. We have this online console guide. So I previously mentioned there was an actual PDF version, but you guys also have a URL you guys can access and share with your customers or merchants. So for example, we just discussed the invoicing function. It kind of goes into a breakdown of how it works, what they can actually do in it, and there's screenshots available as well. So should you have any additional questions or just want a reminder of how it functions, should you not have a test account and maybe want to test it out for yourself, I would just refer back to this guide. So moving forward, we're just going to go to, I want to discuss the payment form option. I'm sorry, let me actually begin with the fraud modules, just because this actually is something that was already accessible through our console one. There's not much of a difference here. One thing I did want to actually pull up related to this was the fact that we actually have online a tool through our wiki that kind of goes into detail and shows a video of each module that we have available. So kind of going into detail of each, I basically just want to discuss the ones that are more widely used and the ones that would be available for your merchants to basically maybe review and consider, I would say. So we have the bid range. The bid range is one. This is basically just selecting for or looking for the first 6 digits of a card. So this is something that you would use if maybe you're wanting to block a certain bid range. So you would need, of course, the first 6 digits of that, but you would enter it as, maybe say, this is just an example, through maybe 5, 8, 9, like that. So just click on cancel. We'll go to previous, then type blocker. So this is something that is ideal for, say, merchants that do not want to accept credit cards. Maybe all they want to accept is debit cards. So what they would do is basically disable, Amex, disable Discover. They would do credit, debit, prepaid. So these are the options they can select from. MasterCard, or these are the options there too. So a lot of debit-only merchants will have to use this bin type blocker module to basically not allow those credit card transactions to go through. We have card level results. This is basically the type of results that come back on a certain card. Let me go back to that here. And the good thing is that there are synopses of what each module kind of does. But again, we have those online tutorials as well that would help with these modules and kind of getting a little more familiar about them. The next one is the card type. The card type one, I feel like they've renamed some of these here. So let me just go ahead and select it. So the card type here, so sometimes we have situations where a merchant, maybe isn't necessarily set up for American Express, or maybe they're not set up for JCB or something along those lines. But sometimes, these cards are attempted and they're authorized. And when they posted a batch, that's fine. Well, then we try to close them out and sometimes it causes an issue. And that's most of the time because maybe they're not set up for like JCB or say, for example, Diners Club. So this module is set to block any sort of attempt that maybe a merchant isn't set up on. So if they're not set up for JCB, En route, Diners Club, we would want to enable these so that they're not attempting them or successfully attempting them. Because again, if they're pre-authorizing, but they're not actually set up or set up correctly for them, and then they attempt to close a batch, and now we have an entire batch that's being held up because of these transactions that were pushed through and they probably shouldn't have been. So then sometimes that may hold up, the actual funding process. So this is something to consider if, maybe we have those certain merchants that are, still wanting to select or allow any old card to come through. So, this is something that they may want to consider. We have the card ID checker, and this is a module that's one of the modules that's kind of widely used. So we have the card ID checker. This is actually checking for the valid match or a valid response on the CVV code. As we may know, the CVV code is not a required field for any given transaction. However, it is encouraged or suggested for the simple fact of security. Sometimes we have online merchants that definitely would like to consider this because say someone gets a hold of a card and now we're not asking for a match with the CVV code, then it potentially could be some fraudulent activity happening. So again, these modules are geared towards preventing fraudulent activity. It's not something that we wouldn't want to guarantee that we're catching everything because, of course, there's still some of those fraudsters that happen to have full address, the actual card perhaps, full card number, and things like that. So if that's the case, then, we just kind of want to let them know that with these modules, it's something that's a tool that they can utilize to help reduce the risk of possible fraudulent activity. So here they would customize those settings and those results of what is being entered. So this is actually the default option. The duplicate detection module is set to block any duplicate transactions. So sometimes for an online merchant, even for the ones attempting through the V-terminal, payment forms, even shopping carts. So this is actually geared toward preventing duplicate charge. So sometimes with point-of-sale integrations, for whatever reason, it will sometimes make a transaction call more than once within a few milliseconds. So sometimes when in situations like that, and it could be a coding concern that's really out of anyone's control besides the point of sale, should they have this duplicate detection module enabled, they would be able to block those sort of instances. Another instance we've seen commonly done is when an online shopper is on a website, for example, and then they make their payment, and then they click the back button. And the back button now generates a new payment. So in situations like that, if the duplicate detection module was enabled, then it would block that duplicate attempt. And so we're basically wanting to avoid a secondary authorization on a customer's card that maybe they're not aware of. And so, that's even something that on the merchant's end, and say they're on the virtual terminal processing a simple charge, and say they happen to just click the back button. Depending on the browser, depending on their system, it's potentially something that can also happen on the merchant or end user side. So with this module enabled, it's something that we can block. And as far as the features or options in this module, so we can select the time frame to basically block. So sometimes these duplicates, I should say usually these duplicates happen within a 5-minute time frame. We've seen that in some cases it'd be even more, but it's more than likely going to happen even within that minute. That's usually the case for duplicate transactions. So just to be safe, I would maybe even recommend just to do like a 10-minute period. For whatever reason, we have some merchants that want to do like 4 days. Don't know why. But if that's the case, they just want to format it to a minute. So 4 days, we're just calculating minutes, the minutes that would equal 4 days. We can ignore the invoice number. So sometimes our systems are generating invoices separately. So separate invoices, even though it's the same card, same transaction amount, but our system generates a separate invoice, then we would want to make sure that we are ignoring that and still catching the duplicate off of just the card number and the amount. And then we have the enable support trace. So this is something, should it be a problematic issue for a merchant for these duplicates, maybe they want to enable this so that should they have an actual issue that they want to report, with this being on, it's supposed to enable that trace for us to kind of dig into as to why they're getting these duplicates. This is an email blocker module. I think this actually looks new to me in this console. So here we have the ability to block certain domains. For whatever reason, say a merchant doesn't want to, accept anything related to Yahoo, or whatever the domain may be. Maybe they've experienced some sort of issue with a certain domain and they do not want to allow. So this is where they would do that. Or maybe they want to allow only certain types of email addresses from certain domains, like maybe Gmail, Yahoo, things like that, the more commonly used ones. So the fraud profiler actually works internally with our, our risk assessment system. From my understanding of this module, it's actually something that even when not enabled, our system is still checking for. But this basically would reassure that the merchant that they are in fact being monitored, or I should say their account activity is going to be monitored closely by our system. We have a block by host or IP option. So this is ideal for merchants that are, maybe an online business, of course, and or maybe not necessarily just online, but we're basically just looking to block certain IPs from this end. So sometimes we have situations where customers will, or I should say fraudsters will try to, get a hold of a customer or a merchant's URL and try to test fake cards on there, or just the validity of cards that they may have a hold of. So we get the IP addresses, so we'll be able to see, okay, we have $100 attempts on various different cards, but they're all coming back from this one IP address. So we could just pull the IP address from, any transaction detail page, because it'll be reported there. So we grab that IP address, so I'll just grab this one for example. We would select the module, and we're just basically adding it here. And so you can add as many as you like, but this is something that would be ideal for those types of scenarios. We have a country blocker. Sometimes we just want to, get transactions from within the States, maybe Canada, maybe the outside island, U.S.-controlled island. But maybe we want to block everything else. Transactions coming in from like Brazil, Australia, China. So if those are transactions or countries, I should say, that the merchant does not want to allow or want to do business with, I would say, go ahead and consider the country blocker for those scenarios. So we have a credit card blocker module. I think I may have discussed this a little bit in one of our previous trainings. So basically, with enabling this module, we are now allowing the merchant to not accept cards that are on our general or universal block list. So we mentioned the fact that a merchant would have their own individual block list that would run specifically just for their account. And then we have a general universal block list, which applies to all merchants using USAePay. Should they want to have that module enabled, they're basically going to, we have our own internal list that we would basically block certain transactions. And should certain cards be attempted from that list on this customer's account, it will not go through. We have the multiple credit cards option. So let me just go in here. So again, this is I can find a scenario of a fraudster attempting certain cards, wanting to check whether there's enough money available on the card. Okay, so as far as that goes, they would want to consider this module so that maybe our system would go ahead and basically look for whatever type of settings they've enabled here. They basically multiple card attempts. So this is looking for the number of cards they've tried from a certain IP address, and we're looking for we're basically looking at the declines in this section, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, even though it's not an approved sale, declines are still affecting the merchant's processing rate. I think I may have heard that somewhere. So the declines don't affect your cost with us, but I believe it would still affect the cost with the processing side. So we want to be able to limit unnecessary declines. So here we would just basically, maybe enter 2 or maybe 3 attempts, and then we're basically allowing the selecting to block by either the client IP, remote client IP, order ID, or invoice number. And then we have a time period. So if they're maybe trying these for a 30-minute window, but we have 30 minutes in here, our system's blocking that for that 30-minute window. That means they'd have to wait 30 minutes before trying again. Just have these last two here, the transaction amount module here. So again, in a situation where we have fraudsters looking at or getting a hold of certain customers and their cards, sometimes they generally, I should say, they try really low dollar amounts, like pennies, dollars, $2, things like that. But if we have a merchant that's doesn't have necessarily a minimum amount, or maybe their cheapest product is like, say, $20, there's really no need for a dollar sale to go through 50 cents, a penny. So at that point, we might want to consider this module and enter like a minimum amount, and we could say just maybe $15. So if somebody is getting a hold of their URL wanting to test cards, and they're trying for like a penny, 2 pennies, it's not going to go through because we are requesting for a minimum of at least $15. Same thing applies for the maximum amount. Should they have fraudulent attempts happening for over a certain threshold, that's something that they could also block here by using this module. Our last one here is a zip code verifier. So this is actually looking for a valid zip code. So if you basically want to, have this one, just checking everything on here. So non-U.S. postal codes, there's a lot of question of whether the address verification module, which I actually haven't discussed yet, which I will in just a moment. We allow the checking of non-U.S. based postal codes. So that means, there's a lot of Canadian merchants now using our USAePay system, and our modules work for those merchants. So we're able to, we're allowing just about any sort of zip code to come through or postal code. So should a merchant want to block anything from, anything that they don't want to come through as far as anything outside of the U.S., I would definitely consider the zip code verifier. So discuss the card ID checker. That's one of our widely used ones. And then I'm not too sure why or where, I should say, the AVS module. Oh, here it is. So the AVS response module, this is one of our top used modules, and that's for the simple fact of checking for a valid address on a card. So typically, again, on any given transaction, we're only, for it to go through anyway, we're only requesting for at least the card number, expiration date, and the amount. That's the very least amount of information needed for any transaction to go through on our system. Of course, we always want to encourage that a customer or merchant enter as much information as possible. That includes address, that includes card ID, or CVV, I should say. So not only are they accepting it, but maybe they want to verify that this, in fact, is a valid address. This is the module they would use to do so. It's checking for the address that's on file on a card with the issuing bank. So we're receiving this result back from the actual issuer. Of course, the first four are set by default. So it's looking for a match on the address and a match on the 5-digit zip code, a match on the address or a 9-digit zip code. Same here, or as far as the next two options go, we're looking for just a match on either the 5-digit zip or the 9-digit zip. If there's no match on the address, and there's no match on the if there's no match on the address, then we're basically okay with it so long as the zip code matches. And we have a number of other options here as well. The address match, 5-digit zip, no match. That may be a slight concern only because at least know the zip code. However, if the merchant feels comfortable with just allowing the transaction to go through with maybe the address matching, that's an option for them. I mentioned the fact that we support international addresses, so these are the options for those if they want to check for out of state, checking the validity of the address being entered for an out-of-state card. An option for the pre-check AVS response. So how this module works is, say basically they're running a sale, and say the customer inputs the wrong zip code. But I asked for the zip code to match, and if it didn't match, I wanted it to be blocked. So my transaction's blocked, it didn't post to my batch, but the customer is still going to see that transaction held on their card. So we have situations where a merchant will run a card, and now we have 3 different attempts, but none of them have posted to the batch because maybe the customer just moved and forgot to update his address with the bank. So now they're entering the wrong zip code, but now we've held that amount on that customer's card up to 3 times. And so that's how the module works by default. However, if in a situation where we're wanting to basically match that information first and then debit the amount from the customer's bank, then we will want to select the pre-check AVS response. So we're looking for a match on the address first, or I should say a match on one of these responses first, before we actually authorize the amount on the card. So I actually strongly consider, or I would say suggest this option for a merchant, just because, again, there's been multiple times where I've come across a merchant that's been dealing with an irate customer because they were online trying to purchase something from the merchant site and tried the attempt 10 times. Now, keep in mind, it's going to hold up those funds 10 times. And even though it didn't post to our batch, and the customer or merchant won't get paid for it, it's still those funds are still not available for the customer, or the end user. And it's really not much we can do at that point because, you know, we can void it, which will kind of help speed up the process with the funds being available again on the customer's side with their bank. But it's still, you know, it's still going to take anywhere from 2 to 3, 4 business days, depending on the bank and their time frames and what day of the week it is, before those funds become available again for the customer. So this is something that I always suggest merchants consider when they do utilize the module. So that kind of wraps up the modules here. As far as the functionality of it, I believe most of them are pretty much similar to how they worked in Console 1. Again, just more so a different look of how it appears in the console. So keep in mind we have a universal fraud module section. When you add a module to this section, it applies to every source tied to the gateway account, whether it be the virtual terminal, whether it be the mobile app, whether it be the online shopping cart that's tied to the account, or the integrated point of sale system, or that QB plugin. Whatever it is, it's going to adhere to any source on the account. However, you know, like I mentioned, most of these modules are geared towards online merchants. So maybe the merchant is, you know, has a retail location, a physical location, but they also have like an online site. And so they're going to want to maybe tighten up security on those online transactions, but maybe they don't want it so tight on transactions that they're experiencing or running, you know, in a face-to-face scenario. So what they would do in that case is basically locate the source that is the online source, and from there they're basically just adding the module specifically to that source and not under universal. That way it's allowing them to basically customize how these modules are working for that merchant depending on the source that they're using. One thing that you want to keep in mind as a, you know, as an agent is that you want to explain to the customer or merchant that if using a module under universal, they don't want to use that same module independently on a different source. So for example, you know, I have it under universal, so you're going to see it on all of my other sources here because it is universal. However, I could specifically enable maybe the, you know, card ID checker, for example. Select it and add it here. So I have the card ID checker independently from here. I think it looks like we might have cleaned that up where you can't necessarily add modules separate, or I should say duplicate modules. In Console 1, that's definitely a concern where you don't want to add a module under universal and then independently also add them to the same module to the same sources, because then the modules conflict and they're you know, they could potentially not work properly for a merchant. So that's pretty much it when it comes to the fraud modules. I mean, we do have, again, an online site on our wiki that kind of goes into more depth of each module and how they work. So this is, again, something that if I haven't already shared with Melanie, I will be doing so she can include that in any sort of online source or resource center that you guys may have. I'll open it up now for any questions related to our modules, should anybody have any.
We did have a question about will this be available on Epic for review? Yes, we will clean up the sound a little bit and post the presentation. The 2 previous presentations are currently available in the training archive, and this one will be available, I would say, early next week. We do have one more question about invoicing. Is it part of the regular pricing or is it an add-on feature? This is an add-on feature. We're adjusting our addendum to reflect that, and we'll send out an announcement once that's been updated. Is the USAePay help desk trained to discuss the fraud center options with merchants and or sales partners. Bridget?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are definitely trained in both channel sales as well as our merchant support department on these modules. One thing we won't regularly do is advise as to which module to use. We can go into detail as to how a certain module will work, but we try to stay away from telling a merchant which one to use just for liability purposes. Of course, that is something that you are more than welcome to suggest to your merchant after hearing how it will benefit them.
As Bridget mentioned earlier, there are online tutorials available that go through how to set up all these modules. I will obtain those tutorials from Bridget and make sure that you guys have access to them as well through Epic. One more question. This is a web-based VT mobile app and web-based application that works like older middleware that used to add card processing to POS software. Is this basically what USAePay is for? Yes, it's definitely not like a hosted software. This is web-based.
It is web-based, all-in-one solution. So ideally, this is something that, again, you can kind of hit just about any sort of merchant out there. Whether it be online, mobile, retail-based, restaurant, anything we service. There's no limitation to the type of merchant that we're willing to work with. If you're willing to process for them, we're willing to do the gateway portion for them. So I just wanted to kind of add, as far as the console 2 setup, and this is more so for like the admin side and who would be creating the accounts for customers. So I'm kind of giving you guys this little sneak peek of what my admin side looks, but it's important to know that by default this device manager option is necessary in order to connect an MP200 to any account. Of course, console 2 is necessary through here. The device manager is needed if they have console 1. Remember, console 1 only supports EMV through the mobile app. So the device manager is available through the mobile app. So if they're wanting to connect the MP200 for EMV transactions on our console 2, we must make sure that this is enabled. If not, it will not work for them. Invoicing, this is something that is added separately, so by default that will not be available. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to share in regards to this screen. Oh, yeah, the fraud center. I will talk to Melanie about that later. So any questions here? I don't want to take too much time on your Fridays here. I tend to kind of go over the allotted time sometimes. So does anybody have any questions or anything that maybe they would like for me to, just talk a little bit more about? You can say anything.
Bridget, for level 3 data, that's only TSYS, correct?
That's correct. TSYS and First Data North.
Okay, great. And just, to reiterate, and I'm sure everybody already knows this on the line, but, if we needed to get to First Data North, you guys know that we'd have to submit the Wood Forest applications, not the EPSG EVO applications. So, however, we can get through direct to TSYS on the EPSG application, so no need to fill out a different app. Okay, one more question. Does anything have to be unchecked in settings for an external printer for receipts to work?
No. So a receipt printer will work with our mobile app. We have a couple of options for receipt printers on a mobile aspect. So usually those connect, I think there's a Bluetooth one now, and there's another one that connects via Wi-Fi. So long as the Wi-Fi settings are enabled on the mobile unit and on the printer, it'll connect fine. On the Bluetooth aspect of it, of course, it will appear on the app, so you can always ensure that the printer is connected successfully through the mobile app.
Yes, and Bridget and I will be working on a training for the mobile app. As you guys have seen, I think this week, USAePay is just a phenomenal solution for mobile, for VT, for retail, for B2B, and given the fact that there's no transaction fee associated with this gateway, it's definitely our preferred vendor for gateway services. And so I just wanted to thank Bridget for attending these webinars with us, for being a great resource. And I look forward to continuing to grow this relationship. I think the attendance shows this week that, you know, our sales partners are very interested and they believe in the solution. So I'm going to take that as feedback to spend more time with developing future trainings, marketing, and all other resources to support the sales of this product.
Absolutely. And so we're actually also looking to, in the near future to also host webinars for all of our partners that, I think maybe you may receive our reseller newsletter.
Yes.
So I just advise, to look out for these sort of trainings, which we want to have one. We're gearing towards having 2 a month. So one would be highlighting like a console feature within USAePay, and the other one would be something related towards like an integrated software piece or an integrated partner. So whether it be, an ACH partner, or we recently had a FiSoft webinar, conducted by FiSoft on our QB, our QuickBooks Online integration. So that's something that, you can also share with your partners, and they're more than welcome to sign up for these webinars and attend them. So I just wanted to let you guys know that in the future we're also kind of gearing towards having these sort of webinars at least once a month, and most of the time we'll gear for 2 a month on certain products.
Great. Okay. So I think that to conclude this session. Again, Bridget, thank you so much.
Of course. Of course, and I do want to thank everyone again for attending. I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a wonderful weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day.